Welcome back to the weekly news roundup. Here we have our second topic for the week. We're going to talk about privacy policies are no guarantee. And this is an interesting thing because I think in a lot of these situations, these companies selling us businesses, we'll speak broadly and then we'll get into our topic. Companies selling these products are more like marketing machines than anything else. They're not the actual coders in the back. You know, the days of Steve Jobs figuring out how to build an Apple computer in the garage, or Google starting in the little garage and figuring out how to do it. Those days are over. A lot of companies now, they're just basically run by a bunch of private equity guys. You know, guys who are professional CEOs. They just jump from train wreck to train wreck to train wreck, collecting golden parachutes as they go, which is a fundamental problem. You know, if you cause a company to crash and burn, I think if anybody has to lose their job in the course of your CEOship, yeah, you should just lose your golden parachute. Sorry. Yeah, I know that's a high bar to meet. Yep. If you're really good, you'll figure it out. You know what I mean? But the problem is that some company gets a good idea. In fact, we were talking about this, you know, is Elon Musk really this Tony Stark figure sitting down in his garage building an Iron Man suit with the help of AI Jarvis? No, he's just a good businessman who can sell ideas. And then he hires the engineers to actually build his ideas. So he's got ideas, but he's not some amazing tech genius. He's, you know, Tony Stark is a made up character. I'm not sure there's anybody much like him these days. But certainly no one with any form of moral root, if you even suggest he had a moral root or not. But the point here is that these companies just have great ideas. They bring on engineers to make it happen. They're taking usually the lowest bid. They want to see the fundamental work. And I work with enough people and enough, heads of companies to know most of them. In fact, I'm not sure I know of any of them that really care about the details. They say, make it work. That's all they care about. Make it work. Make it work, deploy it, sell it. That's their goal. And the problem is that the people developing the things that they're selling us, they don't really care. Sometimes they're just there to insert malware. Sometimes they're just there to make a quick buck, and, you know, security and things like that are not high. Sometimes they just don't know what they're doing, and they're just like the people that I see all the time, like, yeah, I build WordPress. You know, like everybody says they build WordPress. You know, like 1% of those people can build WordPress right. Okay. It's kind of funny because I see it all the time. I end up, people have some site built by somebody else and there's serious problems. They'll get a hold of me and they're like, oh, what's going on? Most likely, without looking at it, the guy who built your website's an idiot. I log into their site. I look at the back. Yep, the guy's an idiot. I can rebuild it for you. It's going to be a lot of money. All right, that's fine. And so that's kind of the challenge, is that these people don't know what they're doing. There's like, oh, we need, just stick with the WordPress example. I need a custom field over here. Advanced custom fields. You know, you can go into the WordPress core and you can go to the little screen options thing at the top. You can pull it down and there's a custom field thing. You can enable it. And then you can go down and you can build a custom field and then you can put it in there. And then you can go to your functions file and you can program the custom field to do something. And then you don't need a plugin for this. It's all in the core. Yet ACF has been hacked 15 bajillion times because everybody and their brother throws it into a WordPress website, even though most of them don't even need it. And that's the same thing that happens with all these applications. People make these applications to sell, and they just throw in these libraries, and they have no idea what these libraries are doing. What are these libraries doing? Well, it's providing this feature and adding 16 different advertising networks in the background that you don't know is there. The person selling the product doesn't know it's there. And then let's get on to these privacy policies. You do realize if you're building something and now certain whatever laws mandate you have a privacy policy, you're like, oh, I'm not sitting down and writing a privacy policy, nor am I hiring a lawyer for $1,000 to write a privacy policy. So you go to a website, you enter in a few different things like the name of your business and a couple things, and it will auto-generate a privacy policy, which is why almost every single privacy policy reads almost exactly the same way. Because they're all just shared among the internet. There's no real cohesion to it. And so you get this privacy policy, you say, oh, this is what we're doing. And you don't really know any difference because you have no earthly idea how the thing's working behind the scenes. So enter, I didn't get to the other article. Enter a research study out of Brigham Young University out there in Provo, Utah. Amazing city, by the way. Campus is really nice too, in fact. But if you have not gone out to Provo, Timpedos Cave is out there in Provo. Beautiful, beautiful bike paths out there. I used to bike out there a lot when I lived in that general area. I'd take drives out to Provo because how beautiful it is. But anyway, they wanted to do a research study through the state of Utah, and they wanted to look at all of these EdTech applications, and they wanted to compare what they were actually doing with what their privacy policies said. And well, wouldn't you know it, that over half of the companies were selling and sharing student data, even though their privacy policy said, we would never do that. Yeah, here's the other article, which is actually, this is from, I don't know, some private equity firm. Like all these private equity firms, I have no earthly idea what these people are doing. I don't know if they're researchers or if they're telling things, but they had a decent blog post here about reliability, durability, and trust are the new competitive edge in EdTech. Yeah, if only reliability, durability, and trust were the core. No, it typically happens to be who is the highest bidder or who can you convince the best. I'm going to go off on another tangent again, because as you may know, after I left the university, I worked with a startup in an EdTech company. And we were one of the early ones doing online homework systems. And our system was developed by a former professor at, I think it's Texas A&M. And so he developed the system to help with his stuff, and he was a chemist like myself. And he's like, well, I didn't like the way that was it Master in Chemistry was doing, which was out of Pearson, because, and I used that myself when it was brand new just to see how it worked. And the problem with a lot of those online homework systems is they are simply right answer, wrong answer. And if you know anything about chemistry particularly, it is a very process heavy system. So what the final answer is doesn't necessarily tell you if you've learned the process to find the answer. And that's what he wanted to correct. So he developed an EdTech platform, which was a lot more focused on the process rather than the actual answer. Was it absolutely amazing? Could solve all the problems? No, but it was better than the other alternatives at the time. So he launched the company as a professor, used it with his students, and then ended up finding some marketing guys to help with it. And he ended up leaving his professor job to run this company, which grew 300% for 3 consecutive years before it was purchased by Macmillan. And then, of course, Macmillan laid off all of us people who were actually making money there and brought in a bunch of flunkies at minimum wage. And I have no idea what happened to the EdTech company from there. But it grew really well and really fast at that time. The challenge is my role, which was just to go and present the software to the professors and answer questions about the scientific end of it. He basically hired people in my role were all people with PhDs and teaching experience, because we would have that one-on-one connection with the professors. The first problem is we could see everybody, all students. We had access to the entire student grading system, including K through 12 kids schools, and FERPA was a law in effect at the time. So technically it was a violation of FERPA. There's no reason I, who worked specifically in the college level, could see actual student grades, including their social security numbers and whatever else in the platform, when my only role for the company is to go in there and just present the front end user facing thing to the professor. But what I'm getting at here is the reason these EdTech companies are such a good market for these private equity firms is because they are targeting, it's basically a captive sale. So I could go in as a professor and I don't have to sell your 30 students that this software is required. I just have to sell the professor. If the professor says, yep, this is required, we make sure it's required. And guess what? If the professor has 30 students, we just made 30 individual sales for the cost of one person. So if we have these big ones like Penn State's chemistry class, when I was at Penn State, the chemistry class there, we had 2,000 students a semester going through Gen Chem. We went in there and won over the chemistry department there. We made 2,000 sales in the semester. All we had to do was present it to the professor. And that's the way these things work. These EdTech companies come in and they just present themselves as the amazing magic bullet to all of the school, and the school's just like, I'm sure it's going to solve the problems we have, and we don't have time to think about it, and they're too busy anyway. So unless they get some really ick about you or see some huge obvious red flag, they'll just pretty much work with a first guy they come into, unless of course they have a friend in the industry or something. And then they've just basically sold the product to everybody. And now the entire purpose is to get all of the students into there. Why? Well, because somebody somewhere wants that data. It may or may not be the person running the company. So this blog post here is talking a lot about why trust has to be the core of this, and why, all these things are. So this is very idealistic, which basically says that, this is what people are looking for. And it's all about trust. It's not about trust at all. It's about solving that problem of meeting all of those statistical things that, guess what, they have implemented, and the school system have no earthly idea how to possibly do it. This company comes and says, hey, we can solve that for you. The school system's like, yeah, whatever. All right, we'll go with it. And so what the Brigham Young did is 2-year investigation into the EdTech applications used by Utah schools found many were collecting and sharing student data in ways appeared inconsistent with their privacy policies. Isn't that amazing? You mean that an EdTech company that didn't even build the software that wants all of my kids' information in there is collecting their data and using it? Now, they're really careful, but this thing does not display ads. That's not the point. They're collecting the data to know how to better psychologically target the kid when an ad gets through on some platform somewhere. That's the point. It's about collecting their data for future use. It's not about, we have it. We become so simple-minded. Is this thing pushing an ad? Well, if it's pushing an ad, it's bad. No. Yeah, pushing ads is bad. But collecting the data that gets fed into the ad networks that push the ads, that's the real danger, and that's going on behind the scenes. And this is what most of these companies had no earthly idea what was going on. So they examined the network traffic from 100 EdTech apps between 2023 and 2025. Rather than relying on only privacy policy or vendor assurances, researchers looked at what the apps were actually transmitted while in use. Of the 85 apps tested with relevant data agreements, that means 15% or 15 apps didn't even have privacy agreements. 52% of them reportedly collected at least one student data element that was not permitted under the agreement. Over half. So, by contractual promises are not always reflected in how the app behaves. An app can include third-party analytics, software, advertising-related services, and other embedded components that sends information elsewhere without the school or district having a clear view of those transfers. Because the school or district doesn't know and doesn't really care. So the state's response to extended beyond publishing the findings. Vendors with potential issues were asked to explain them or remedy them. Companies that addressed concerns could have their identities redacted in the public report. So, hey, we found you're doing stuff you're not supposed to be doing. But if you correct stuff, we won't name drop you in our article. So companies that address concerns can have them redacted, an approach designed to encourage corrective action while holding the vendors that failed to respond to account. So the law requires educational entities to include specified student data protections and vendor contracts, notify vendors of unauthorized use of student data, and terminate contracts when a vendor does not remedy the privacy violation as being notified. So this is an interesting article where even reading the privacy policy, you have no guarantee what they're doing because they may not know what they're doing. It's the same thing. And I am going to set up a test bench to research some of this stuff because it's interests me. When I was back in January, I was helping at the Van Life conference down there. And one of the guys came in and he has this brand new app for van dwellers, right? You can just use this app and then you can click the button and it just sends a blast notification out to everyone who cares about you that you've clicked the button. And of course, it has to verify who you are with biometrics, so face scan or a fingerprint scan to prove it's actually you, despite no, it doesn't necessarily prove it's actually you. But that's kind of what they say. And he's basically, hey, you have a 30-day free trial of this. Oh, you should try this. He tried to sell me. We had some conversations. I would love to try his free trial out because I want to see what the app is actually doing. I have a sneaky suspicion that the app is simply put together. He had this grand idea. He went up to like Upchuck or something, that's Upwork. And he's like, hey, I need an app that does this. And some Indian developer's like, I will do this job for you. And then he works the thing in, and he's got no idea what the thing's doing. And he's got a prize. Yeah, we're not collecting anything. Yeah, because he doesn't even know. He didn't explicitly build anything in there that does it. Yet I have a sneaky suspicion, and I don't know this for sure. That's why I'm not going to name the app or anything. I have a sneaky suspicion if I installed that on a test bench and looked at the network traffic of the app, I have a sneaky suspicion there's going to be a lot of data trackers in that app. Think of this thing. This thing's got GPS capabilities. It's got biometric authentication. It's got access to your phone. It has access to your contacts. All stuff that all of these companies want to know about you. Yeah, we don't collect any of the data. Well, just because you're not the one going in there and harvesting stuff out of Google Analytics doesn't mean somebody isn't. And those are the things we have to keep in mind when we're looking at stuff like this. That these privacy policies, these are not like, it's like all these companies work with third parties, Our third parties have the greatest security. They have spit, shake, and punky swore with us. We even had a dinner. They don't care. They're doing the same thing you're doing. They're outsourcing it to somebody else. And it leaks. And there's a problem. And data is being harvested. And data is being analyzed. And nobody is the wiser because you have allowed some nonsense application into your life. And that is what we need to stop doing. Let me know your thoughts about all that in the comments down below.